What if all medicines were made only in orbit? The first thing we would see is a different delivery path. Medicines would start on Earth as raw materials. They would then travel to a specialized launch site. From there, they would ride a powerful rocket into the sky. Their destination would be a factory in low Earth orbit. Raw materials would be processed or finished into their final form. Then, the finished drugs would be packaged and sent back to Earth. This new path would be the only way for any medicine to reach any patient, anywhere. This fundamental change would alter many parts of the global drug system. It would not be a simple swap of one factory for another. It would change who makes the drugs, creating new opportunities for some and challenges for others. It would change who pays for them. Development costs, manufacturing costs, transportation costs. It would also change how fast drugs can reach patients. This essay explains the key rules and limits that would shape this system. It keeps to real, measurable steps and avoids speculation about unknown tech. This new system is not a fantasy. It is based on real principles of physics and economics. The core idea: space's unique environment. Microgravity near perfect vacuum could allow purer or more complex medicines. The immediate outcome is a lengthening of the supply chain. Before, a factory could be built near its market. Now, every single pill must voyage hundreds of kilometers up and back down. Pill injection treatment. This introduces new points of potential failure and delay. A problem with a rocket, a solar flare affecting an orbital factory, an error in re-entry could disrupt supply across a continent. In this new reality, we must ask, who are the participants in this system? First, there are the makers, pharmaceutical companies, research laboratories. They design and develop new drugs and test them. Their role stays crucial, but manufacturing would be radically different. Next, the launch providers, private launch companies, national space agencies. They become the vital link. The truckers of this age, moving materials up to orbital factories, bringing finished products down. Their reliability and cost structure would set the industry's rhythm. Then, the regulators, agencies like the FDA and the EMA. They ensure medicines are safe and effective. Their job becomes harder: new standards and inspection protocols for space manufacturing. Hospitals, pharmacies. They are the final distributors who get medicines to patients. Inventory management must handle longer, unpredictable lead times. Finally, the payers and the patients. Payers, insurers, and national health systems decide if orbit-made drugs are worth higher costs. Patients are the end consumers relying on the system. Each actor has a distinct goal. Makers want reliable, predictable manufacturing. Launch firms want steady demand to cut costs. Regulators want undeniable proof of safety and consistency. These goals often compete. Patients want immediate access to the cheapest medicine. Launch providers need scheduled, high-volume launches to lower prices. That conflicts with urgent, on-demand needs during outbreaks. A drug maker may push a novel orbital process for an edge. Regulators may demand years of extra testing. The interplay of these interests defines the system's efficiency and equity. What constraints would matter most in this system? The physical limitations of rockets are the most immediate and defining factor. Each rocket launch has a strict limit on the mass and the volume of the payload it can carry into orbit. This is not a soft limit. It is a hard physical boundary dictated by fuel capacity and engine power. This constraint directly translates into a high cost per kilogram sent to space. It also establishes a clear threshold. Heavy, low-value bulk items, like saline solution, would likely never be worth sending up. Only high-value substances. Only extremely small-volume substances would be candidates for orbital processing. There are also strict rules from regulators that create significant constraints. Any drug must undergo rigorous testing in human clinical trials on Earth before approval. This process is long and expensive, often taking a decade or more. If a key part of manufacturing is moved to orbit, regulators will demand additional proof. They will want evidence that this change does not harm the drug's safety, purity, efficacy. This requirement adds extra steps, extra delays, extra costs to the development timeline for any orbit-made medicine. What would be the immediate system-wide effects of shifting all drug manufacturing to orbit? First, the global pharmaceutical supply chain would become more fragile in certain ways. Its complete reliance on a handful of launch sites and a small fleet of rockets would introduce several single points of failure. A natural disaster, a geopolitical conflict, a technical problem grounding a specific type of rocket could halt the supply of essential medicines for the entire world. This would place immense strategic importance on the countries that possess and control launch capabilities, creating a new dimension of geopolitical power and vulnerability for all other nations. A second major consequence would be the emergence of a new geographic and economic divide. Countries with their own domestic launch capacity and orbital infrastructure would have a significant advantage. Earlier access, more reliable access, perhaps cheaper access. Nations without this capacity would be entirely dependent on the services and timelines of others. They might be forced to pay a premium for launch services or wait longer for their supplies, especially during times of high demand or global crisis. This could exacerbate existing inequalities in global health, creating an access to orbit gap that mirrors other economic divides. Third, the entire financial and regulatory landscape for pharmaceuticals would need to be rebuilt. Insurers and government health programs would have to establish new rules for pricing and reimbursement. They would face the difficult task of determining if an orbit-made drug is worth a potentially higher cost. They would demand clear and compelling evidence that the space-based manufacturing process leads to a demonstrably better health outcome, a safer drug, a more effective treatment, or a cure for a previously untreatable disease. Without such proof, they would be unlikely to approve payment for these more expensive medicines, limiting their adoption. There are also potential positive impacts that could spread through the system. The unique conditions of orbit might enable companies to successfully manufacture complex molecules that are too fragile or difficult to create on Earth. This could unlock entirely new classes of medicines, offering hope for diseases that are currently considered untreatable. Furthermore, the ability to produce purer compounds could lead to drugs with fewer side effects, improving the quality of life for millions of patients. But these gains are not guaranteed. At this point, models diverge beyond this point. Some economic models show these benefits creating immense health value, while others predict the high costs will prevent these gains from ever reaching the public. Rocket launches are not like trucks leaving a warehouse. They operate on a tight and often inflexible schedule. Weather conditions, technical checks, and airspace clearances can delay a launch by days or even weeks. If a specific medicine is needed quickly to respond to a localized disease outbreak, any delay in the supply chain could have devastating consequences. This introduces a fundamental trade-off between the potential quality gains of orbital manufacturing and the very real cost of time. In the long term, this complex system of costs, benefits, and feedback loops could settle into one of a few stable states. The first and perhaps most likely state is that of niche use. Only a select few, extremely high-value drugs are made in orbit. Complex cancer therapies, cures for rare genetic disorders where the manufacturing process is impossible on Earth, and the price per dose is already exceptionally high. The vast majority of common medicines would continue to be made entirely on the ground. A second possible state is one of wider adoption, likely only if the cost of launch drops dramatically by orders of magnitude from today's prices. A third potential state is outright failure. The initial promise fails to materialize, and orbital factories are decommissioned. The final insight is this: moving all medicine manufacturing to orbit is technically possible for some products, but it is not a simple or guaranteed win. The open question that we are left with is not, can we do it, but for which specific medicines is the long and expensive flight truly worth it? What scenario should we explore next? Share your ideas below. You've been watching Ifverse, where imagination meets possibility. See you in our next reality.